right. Ladies and gentlemen, our broadcast was interrupted accidentally, so I guess we're going to have to start all over again. I very much apologize for this, and I thank you for your indulgence. For those who have watched, well, you get a quick review, and hopefully the second time around will be better than the first. We're studying Torah together. This is a good thing to do. I will tell you that studying Torah, besides being a very good thing to do, is something that can actually give us guidance and direction just when we need it most. And this week's Torah portion, which has two parashiyot conjoined, the parashiyot of Acharei Mot and the parasha of Kedoshim, it's Torah. It's this week's Torah portion. We should study it assiduously and with devotion. And I think it is reasonable to say that we will find guidance, inspiration, and instruction in our day and age. So with no further ado, Parashat Acharei Mot opens with God speaking to Moshe Rabbeinu. Vayidaber Hashem el Moshe, God talks to Moshe. The Torah says that God talking to Moshe takes place Acharei Mot Shnei Bnei Aharon. That this communication from God to Moses is after the passing of the children of Aaron. The passing of the children of Aaron, Bikorvatam Lifnei Hashem, when they came close to God, Vayamutu, and they died. Tragic indeed. Aaron's sons rushed the Holy of Holies, and in doing so, Aaron's sons paid a terrible, terrible price. They went into the Holy of Holies with unauthorized incense, and the result was, tragically, that they expired. This is a story, a narrative we read about in Parshat Shemini. The Torah subsequently gave us the laws of kashrut. The Torah went on to talk about the laws of the paranormal discoloration known as tzarat in Parshat Tazria, in Parshat Betzorah. Parshat Betzorah concludes with various laws of ritual impurity which are caused through fluids that come out of a person's body. And now the Torah returns to its original narrative. So why does it say that God spoke to Moshe Acharei Mot Shnei Bnei Aharon? Verse 1 doesn't even tell us what he said, and immediately afterwards, verse 2 begins to give us the details of Yom Kippur. So the Chizkuni tells us that you must know that this communication was given to Moshe Rabbeinu bo bayom, on that very day shehukam ha-mishkan, that the Mishkan was established. Why would it be given on the day the Mishkan was established? That's Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and this is not relevant, really isn't relevant, until Yom Kippur. It's almost 7 months away, at least 6.5 months away. Why is God giving Moshe Rabbeinu the details of the Yom Kippur rites, the Day of Atonement? There are so many other things that are now on the agenda. We're going to get to the month of Nisan. We're going to celebrate Passover for the first, and it was the only time they brought the Korban Pesach in the desert. And then in the month of Iyar, they begin to move towards Eretz Yisrael, the Holy Land. And that's when we get interrupted with the story of the scouts and the disastrous consequences and then a rebellion against Moses. Why is the business of Yom Kippur being talked about on the first day of Nisan? So Chizkuni tells us this is because Be'oto Yom, it was on that day that Aaron's children passed because they entered the Holy of Holies. So now, Moshe Rabbeinu is telling Aaron that the Holy of Holies really can't be accessed at will. It's something that can only be done on the day of Yom Kippur. Rashi is very much bothered by the fact that the Torah emphasizes the exact timing of this communication. Something we don't find prior or subsequent. And so Rashi offers us the following interpretation. He says, Vayedaber Hashem el Moshe. God spoke to Moshe, Acharei Mot Shnei Bnei Aharon, after the children of Aaron passed? Ma Talmud Lomar. What is that teaching us? I mean, the Torah means teaching. So says the Zohar. Torah is Milshon Hara. Everything's an instruction. What difference does it make when God gave Moshe Rabbeinu this mitzvah? It's a mitzvah that's relevant, meaningful, important, binding for centuries. In fact, for posterity. We don't have a Beit HaMikdash today, but we will have a Beit HaMikdash B'ezrat Hashem, and the same mitzvah will be binding. What difference does it make when God told it to Moshe Rabbeinu? We have 613 mitzvahs in the Torah. Precious few of them do we know precisely the time of their being communicated or given to us. It's actually not relevant. But they must be relevant here. And so Rashi says, Ma Talmud Lomar. What is this coming to teach us? What do we learn from this? And so Rashi does something fairly unusual. He introduces us to one of the great sages. You may recognize this name from your Haggadah. Yeah, he was there. Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, a very young man whose remarkable sapience and insight reflected his ability to understand Torah on a level that would require decades of profundity and experience. And Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah, at a very early age, had this understanding. He had this depth, he had this appreciation, this grasp of the deepest secrets of the Torah. And so Rashi says, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah Mashaloi, he used to give us Moshla and Mashal. He'd give us a parable. And the parable would convey to us the meaning of the Torah's words here. And the story goes like this. The parable. A chola, a sick person. Nichnas etzlo rofe. A doctor comes to pay a house call. And the physician, in examining the patient, tells him in no uncertain terms, with great seriousness, Omar lo, he said to him, Al tochal tzonen, knock off the Slurpees. You can't drink cold things. Al tishkav betachav, don't lay in a cold, moist place. And that was it. And the doctor left. Then Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah went on. Bo acher, another physician came. Seems the first physician's words fell on deaf ears. Va'omar lo, and he said very sternly to the patient, Al tochal tzonen va'al tishka batachav, don't drink cold things, don't lie in a cold damp place. And then he added the following sentence, Shalo tamut kederech shemet ploni. So this and this person, and he gives him a name, somebody the patient knew. The sick person knew this person, and he says, that person you knew, he died. He died because he didn't listen to physician's orders. So you need to be really careful. Don't violate what the doctor tells you. You may die. That's what happened to the last guy. Rashi says, Zezerzo, the second physician's words had a much greater impact. They really got the patient to listen and to commit, much more than the first doctor. And that's the reason that it says, Acharei mot shnei bnei Aharon. In other words, what Rashi's telling us is that God told Moses to tell his brother Aaron, don't go into the Holy of Holies, because if you go into the Holy of Holies, you might die like your children. Not a good idea. You have to avoid that. And it was only when God conveyed it to Aaron, those very straightforward, unvarnished, serious words, that Aaron said, oh, okay, well in that case, I really can't do this, because if you're telling me clearly don't do it, you may die, I'm not going to do it. Now, my friends, I'm asking you to stop for a moment and think. Think about what's going on here. Essentially, Moshe Rabbeinu is coming to Aaron and telling him, on the day his sons died. That's what the Chizkuni told us, is on that day. On the day his sons died, immediately after the tragedy, Moshe Rabbeinu comes and says, Aaron, so your sons just died, eh? Listen, don't try that. Don't try that, because if you try that, you end up the way they did. Talk about a lack of sensitivity, a lack of decency. Really? Firstly, why even bring it up? Secondly, on the day, in the heat of the moment, something seems so amiss. And in general, if you think about it, Aaron was one of the most subservient people in history. He did everything that his younger brother Moshe Rabbeinu told him. Rashi tells us multiple times in his commentary on the Torah, Shevacho shel Aaron, that the praise of Aaron was Shelo Shina. He didn't do his own thing. He didn't deviate. He didn't change. He had orders. He had a clear and lucid path that was set before him. He never veered off it. In other words, it's not as if Aaron is prone to disobey. It seems a little harsh. It seems unnecessary. In fact, frankly, it seems inappropriate. There are so many things that the Torah tells us not to do. The Torah never comes along and says, if you do these things, you're going to pay a price. I mean, such and such, these people paid a price. Hardly ever would the Torah come along and say to you, and hardly ever does it come along and say. And there are some very serious issues in the Torah, and we're talking about me and you. We rebel all the time, unfortunately. And yet, we didn't get the second doctor's orders. But Aaron, who always does the right thing, Aaron, who always listens to the instructions that he's given, in fact, that's his M.O. Shvacho shel Aaron. Aaron needed to be warned in these kind of terms? It seems so unfair, so harsh. Something's missing. You know, the Sefarno points out that verse 1 starts with the word Vayedaber. Verse 2 starts with the word Vayomer. Vayedaber means to talk. And we've learned prior in Rashi's commentary that, well, talk can be tough. But Vayomer is words that are spoken, and oftentimes softly spoken. Tough talking, soft speaking. So the first verse is tough. That's a very tough message. The second verse is Moshe Rabbeinu softly speaking and telling Aaron, here's what you need to do, and here's what you shouldn't do. So the first message was very, very direct, very harsh, in no uncertain terms. The Sefarno says that dibur, that talking, can sometimes be broad, overarching. You know, you talk to the walls. You never speak to the walls. You talk to the walls. Sometimes you feel like you're talking to the walls. And when you're talking to the walls, it's because you're giving this really harsh message and they're not listening. Am I talking to the walls? Why aren't you listening to me? I'm telling you like it is. Softly spoken, you're usually engaging your audience. When you speak softly, people will listen. If you use words that are positive, uplifting, encouraging, and inspirational, if you engage with people, if you use words that are heartfelt, words that are softly delivered, you don't have to yell at people and tell them you're talking to the walls. The Sefarno says that dibur is broad, is a broad message. It's a mirror that's very specific. In other words, Moshe Rabbeinu gave Aaron two messages. Don't do what your children did. That's just a broad warning. And then after, Moshe Rabbeinu begins to softly convey the details. And I'm asking you, my friends, did Aaron really need that? Did he really have to be spoken to so harshly? Wouldn't it have sufficed if Moshe Rabbeinu would simply tell Aaron, this is what Hashem wants? And of course, this is not Moshe Rabbeinu's idea. This is God. This is God who is perfect. This is God who is all-knowing. This is God who is all-loving. This is God speaking. Why? Why would God speak to Aaron in that fashion? The Rebbe explains this in a really remarkable way. But he asks another question first. Rebbe Eliezer ben Azariah's story, his mashal, his parable, it evokes the imagery of a sick person Why, says the Rebbe? Why a sick person? Aaron's healthy. Who is ill? Why couldn't the mashal be for a healthy person? Coming to a healthy person and say, don't do these things. Preventative medicine. You will get sick. You will die. Why did it have to be a doctor who is visiting a patient? And so the Rebbe says that there's something quite remarkable that's being conveyed to us. Although healthy people also sometimes need to get a lecture from their doctor, and although they also have to be told at times to behave, whether it's lose some weight, start exercising, stop smoking or drinking, I don't know. You might get sick. A healthy person, as a rule, is capable of listening to his or her physician. But the Torah says this is not a normal situation. This is an extraordinary situation. Why? What makes this situation extraordinary? Why was such a harsh warning warranted? For this, Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah said, I have a parable, I have a mashal. And the parable is about a sick person. You see, the Rebbe says, when a person is burning up with fever, what's the most natural thing for them to want to do? To lower the fever. And how might they do that? When a person is burning up so feverishly, they want to drink something very cold. They want to put something cold inside them, something that will soothe them. They want to be in a cool and damp environment. It'll make them feel better. But it's a dangerous thing to do. The fever needs to break. They need to be kept in bed, drinking hot fluids. They need to get through the illness, not artificially try to induce themselves with a better feeling. Because those activities, although there's a natural yearning and a thirst and a desire, they're profoundly dangerous to the patient. And this, my dear friends, is the point. The point is that Aaron's children rushed forward because they had this passionate yearning for closeness to God. They weren't bad people. In fact, our sages tell us that their righteousness eclipsed even the righteousness and the spiritual rapture of Moshe and Aaron. Nadav and Avihu were very special people. And they had this enormous thirst, this desire to be swept up in holiness, to feel and to reach the euphoria of spiritual oneness with God. And therefore they did something unauthorized. They did something which wasn't scripted. And it wasn't a punishment. It was that they became so excited and uplifted and elevated that at some point the soul simply took leave of the body, as the Or HaChaim explains. Moshe Rabbeinu knows his brother Aaron. God knows Aaron. God knows Aaron better than Aaron knows himself. And that same fervor and that same passion and that same yearning and that same thirst that Aaron's children had, it came to them from their father. Aaron had the same passion. Aaron had that same yearning to cling to God. And therefore, the chances of Aaron, like a feverish person, mindlessly reaching for that Slurpee, the chances that Aaron, like a person who's burning up with temperature, is going to try to alleviate his suffering, is going to try to slake his thirst by being in that cool, damp place, it's exactly what might overtake Aaron. It's not because Aaron wants to disobey. It's precisely because he's a good person. That's the issue here. And so he tells Moshe Rabbeinu to promptly warn him, don't repeat that mistake. Of course it's understandable, but it's not good. And it's not right. It's natural, but sometimes we can't simply give in to nature. Sometimes we have to be subservient to Hashem, and even when it goes against our nature. That was the message that Moshe Rabbeinu brought from God to Aaron at that very moment. As Aaron wistfully saw his children swept up in holy fervor, Moshe Rabbeinu had to tell him, Aaron, I know, God knows that you too are driven with that same spiritual desire. Don't give in. Don't let it overtake you. And because we speak here about a natural desire, because we speak here about something so organic and elemental, it could only be conveyed to Aaron, and the terms are, look what happened to your children. That's how we understand the opening verses in view of the teaching of our Rishonim as the Rebbe illuminates it. And I'd like to conclude with what I think is a very, very timely message for us. There's an enormous amount of, well, let's just say, energy, positive energy, negative energy. There's infighting, there's yelling and screaming, and people pointing fingers on all sides, especially in the Jewish community now. And it's about the study of Torah, and it's about the shul, and it's about minyanim and getting together and having prayer services. And my friends, you have to realize that it doesn't come from a bad place. It comes from a very good place. We all want to be close to Hashem. All of our lives, and for centuries, for millennia, we've been told that to be close to God, we can't stay home and pray. To be close to God, we need to do it with others. We need to daven with a minyan. It's the most natural and normal thing for people to feel this urge, this yearning, this desire to congregate. That's who we are as a nation. Our spirituality has always resonated when we were together as a whole, as a tzibur, tzaddikim, beinanim, rishoyim, supremely righteous people, people who are kind of in between, and people who are really, really wicked and evil, and yet at the core of their being is still a spiritual drive. And it's when everybody comes together that holiness is created. The Shekhinah, God's presence, is actualized when we have a minyan, when we have a quorum of people to pray with. It's understandable. But my friends, it's still wrong. It's still wrong because Aaron and sons, Nadav and Avihu, were swept up in holy fervor. And tragically, they paid with their lives. It's a good thing for us to want to daven with a minyan. It's a beautiful thing for us to have this aching emptiness and this great, tremendous thirst, this yearning to be together with our brethren again. It's not okay to break the law. It's not okay to put ourselves in danger, because that's not what Hashem wants. Hashem wants us to serve Him in good health. Hashem wants us to be able to actualize His presence in good standing. Hashem wants you and I to be healthy Yidden. And to be healthy, we have to be physically separate now. And the yearning, the desire, the passion to cling to Hashem, that's a good thing. Feed that fire. And let's continue to be thirsting for it. And hopefully, before we know it, this awful situation will come to an end. We'll be able to gather together again for Torah and for Tefillah. And hopefully, our yearning will be so meaningful before Hashem that He will answer our deepest of prayers, and He will finally grant us the coming of Mashiach b'mheira will be Ameinu Amen.